I'm not ashamed to hold my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
I'd like us this evening, we're going to be focused in Isaiah 53. I know the text has Psalm 38 as well, but I think Isaiah 53 better encapsulates the message when examining the context of Psalm 38. Even though I'm not denying that it can certainly fit with Jesus, neither of those two passages, neither Psalm 38 or Isaiah 53, is quoted in respect to the prophecy that we're talking about this evening. We can see it in the New Testament. We can understand that it applies to Jesus. The reason why I stuck with Isaiah 53 is because we know that one specifically applies to Jesus. Whereas Psalm 38 itself is a psalm of David. It is a good psalm, but it is not one that you can just pick out, oh yes, this is Jesus, because either the New Testament says so, or because it is just plainly obvious. And so, I'd like us to read Psalm 53, and we're going to do the entire psalm. We'll do 4 verses each, but I'd like you to consider verse 7 as we pass by. And I'd like you to think about why this was important that Jesus not speak while being oppressed. So why is it important? And it's not just, oh yes, it was prophesied, but it was prophesied for a reason. And so why is that? So let's read 4 verses each. We'll start with Tammy, go to Bill and Henry through the end of the chapter.
Who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He has no form or comeliness, and when we see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted.
But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him. By his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And who will declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was stretched.
And they met his grave with the wicked, and with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He has put him to grief. When you make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed. He shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see the labor of his soul, and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant shall justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he put out his souls into death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sins of many, and made intercession with transgressors.
Okay. So as we said, this passage is not, as it relates to Christ's silence, is not specifically quoted in the New Testament. However, from passages like in Acts 8, where Philip teaches the Ethiopian eunuch, we do know that this passage relates to Jesus. And so we can say that Jesus fulfilled all of what is described here. And when we discuss Isaiah 53, when we get to that lesson, we will discuss a little bit more in depth. We're only here because, if you've noticed, we've been going chronologically through the Old Testament. And so we're in Psalms, and there's plenty of Psalms that talk about the Messianic promises. And so that's why we're in Isaiah 53. It's because the author really stuck us in Psalm 38 as well. But my question was, it is said that he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb, as a sheep to the lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent. Besides the fact that it was prophesied, why was it important, when you think about Jesus, that he was silent before his accusers? There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, or just one answer. Why do you suppose?
Because of what goes around, we think. One, like, they think he was complaining to God for what was happening.
Okay, so that is one. That is certainly one. Like, as far as he would seem like a complainer to God for what's going on, and I could see that. Like, as far as Jesus was sent to die, that was his mission, and if he was complaining about it, would it really show his agreement with the Father in heaven that this was his purpose? And you could sort of see that when it comes to the sheep, to the lamb before the shearers. The lamb's not complaining that it's being sheared. The lamb's not. You're not hurting the lamb in a sense by shearing it. But that's the description. We can't take that too far. But the lamb before the shearers is silent because you're just shearing it. And that's the description. What else might you think when it comes to why it was important that Jesus was silent before his accusers?
Some things don't justify our response.
Yeah, some things don't justify a response. Remember, Proverbs, we looked at, don't answer a fool according to his folly. There were liars there. They were saying things that were not true. How do you argue with someone who does not have one shred of truth? Was there anything Jesus could say to change their minds? No. When we face people today, and we come to the conclusion, it don't matter what I say, they are dug into their opinions or their beliefs, whether it's religious beliefs, secular beliefs, political beliefs, health beliefs, whatever it is. It don't matter what we say. Then really, what's the point in arguing about it? You're getting yourself nowhere. Except probably raising your blood pressure, causing hatred, especially if it's among friends. You're going to have to agree to disagree if it's about opinion. And it will cause division. If it's about truth, it will really cause division. But it's foolish to argue with foolish people who will not see the truth no matter what. I face that a lot, where you can give them fact upon fact upon fact, but they don't hear it because they will discount those facts as coming from places that they don't agree with. And Jesus was in that situation. The chief priests wanted to kill him. They were looking for any reason to kill him. And so he opened not his mouth. Bill.
I wonder if it's for the benefit not only the apostles and disciples, but even for us. Like, what would we think if the story had been different?
Mm-hmm.
Christ.
Yeah.
What if he had done maybe like we would do?
That's a third reason. In other words, he was giving us an example of how to treat oppressors. It's very easy to revile and to say things that are wrong when we get angry. Oftentimes, our tongue is loosed when we get angry, and we say things that will damage our reputation, damage someone else's reputation, or just out and out, flat out lying. And we can harm relationships with an angry tongue quicker. And those are very hard to repair. So if Jesus acted like the world, then how can someone come along and claim, you need to be like Jesus? Well, that's not any different than acting like the world. So we got three reasons. Any other ones that you can think of? When you think of the trial of Jesus.
It reminds me of the principle of turn the other cheek.
Okay.
Part of his teachings.
Which Jesus taught. In other words, he wasn't going to pay back evil for evil. He was going to suffer for what would be the greater good. He was going to suffer, and it doesn't mean he enjoyed it, but so often we choose to act in a way that's not very Christ-like, even at the hint of something that might be a little unpleasant that someone else does to us. We complain, it's not fair, this person's out to get me. Instead of, saying, okay, they might have acted wrongly, but that doesn't justify me acting wrongly as well. Think about what the Pharisees and the scribes and the chief priests were trying to do. They had lying witnesses there, but those lying witnesses couldn't agree with each other. So in other words, the lying witnesses you couldn't even use as justification because they couldn't agree with each other about what the charge should be, about what Jesus said. And so if you came before Pontius Pilate and said, these are our witnesses, well, Pilate's going to ask them, and he's going to say, these guys aren't reliable. How could you possibly convict someone on the testimony of these guys? So what else would Jesus, knowing with that in mind, what else is another reason why Jesus would be silent before his accusers? Does he not want to give them any ammunition to convict him with? Why is it that defense lawyers in court rarely will call the defendant to testify? Because they know that although they may have control of direct examination and can get the defendant to say what he needs to say, he knows there's going to be cross-examination by the prosecuting attorneys. And if the defendant says something that incriminates them, it will be used against them. You are making the prosecution's case for them because you're the direct witness. It is very rare. That's why we are told you do have the right not to speak, not to incriminate yourself. Now, I'm not saying Jesus would have incriminated himself, because there was nothing that could incriminate him, but he wasn't going to give them any more ammunition. He was acting like a defendant. He was being unjustly accused, so he wasn't going to answer that. But he wasn't going to give them anything with which they might have twisted his words and therefore accused him of something. Because they weren't going to accuse him justly, but they could very well accuse him unjustly of something. And so he kept silent. And then, of course, the ultimate reason, he had to die. He could have exonerated himself. Could have said, you misunderstood what I said about building the temple and raising it in 3 days. I'm not out to destroy the temple. You misunderstood what it meant when I said I'm a king. My kingdom is not of this world, or else my servants would fight. I'm not here as a threat to Caesar. I'm not here as a threat to your power. I am here as the Messiah of God. He could have said those things. Now, whether the Pharisees, how they would have reacted to that is another story. But he could have said those things. And there would have been a real likelihood, not a possibility, that they let him go. Or that someone on the council says, we just can't convict this guy. And then Jesus wouldn't have died. Or at least he wouldn't have died then. And God was not going to do that. Jesus was not going to do that. He knew why he was there. He was not there to be released. He was there to be convicted. He was there to be crucified. The time had come. And so Jesus had been stirring up the Pharisees all week. He had gotten them to the point where they hated him so much, he threatened them with their position so much that they were going to do it. And he wasn't going to stop them. So for all those reasons, he was silent. Yet, he did speak one time during his trial. He wasn't silent when something happened that required his answer. So if we go to Matthew, the 26th chapter. I think it's the 26th chapter. Here it is, yes. It's the 26th chapter. And we're going to come down to verse 62. And Tammy can read verses 62 to 64. And Bill can get verses 65 and 66.
And the high priest arose and said to him, do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look now, you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think? They answered and said, he is deserving of death.
So why did Jesus answer here? He had been silent all night. Why did he answer here?
I guess by the law and land.
All right, so he was put under oath.
Put under oath.
So yeah, I would say, yeah, that's part of it. He was put under oath. He was compelled to speak. But there was a specific question he was asked that he had to answer. And that if he didn't answer, would be denying something. Yeah. If he said, the high priest put him under oath, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. That was the question. Not tell us if you will destroy the temple in 3 days and build it up again. Not are these liars lying about you? No. Tell us if you are the Christ, which is the King, the Messiah, the Son of God. Had Jesus said nothing, what would that silence have indicated? That he wasn't. That's why Jesus spoke. He said, it is as you said. In other words, yes, I am the Christ. I am the Son of God. And hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. That is a reference to the book of Daniel. And it is, and even Ezekiel. And you have Jesus not only claiming to be the Son of God, but using the language that the Jews understood as Messianic language. And you see from the high priest's reaction in verse 65 that our supposition Jesus didn't speak was exactly why he didn't speak. Because they say, he's blaspheming. They're going to twist his words. They don't believe what he said, but he had to say it. And so before the Jews, he was silent when he had to be silent. Not answer a fool according to his folly. But answer a fool according to his folly is the very next part of that proverb. Because it was a foolish question to ask Jesus if he was the Christ, the Son of God. Because what other prophet could do the things Jesus did? Who could raise the dead? Who could heal the blind, the paralyzed, the deaf? Who could feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish? Who could teach with the authority Jesus taught with, perfect understanding and knowledge of the law of Moses, despite having not been schooled in it? There was so much evidence of Jesus' messiahship, that he was the Christ, that it was a foolish question for Caiaphas to ask that. But he didn't believe it. Jesus had to answer. But he also answered before Pontius Pilate for a very similar reason. Because this is not before the Jews. This is before Pilate. And Pilate, he was silent before Pilate too, and this amazed Pontius Pilate as well. In John chapter 19, verses 10 and 11 we'll give to Henry. And verse 12 we'll give to Tim. John chapter 19, we'll do 10 to 12.
10 to 12?
You'll do 10 and 11, Tim will do 12.
Okay. Then Pilate said to him, are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify, power to release you? Jesus answered, you could have no power at all against me, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greatest sin.
From then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, if you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar.
What's the difference between Pilate's reaction to Jesus' response and Caiaphas' reaction?
Well, Pilate wanted to release him.
Yeah.
He didn't have the courage.
He didn't have the courage to. But a different reaction. He didn't hate Jesus. Pilate was a coward. in this event. He did not act out of hate, whereas the Jews were blinded by hate and by a lust for power. But Pilate understood what Jesus said, might not have believed it, but Jesus didn't come across as a man deserving of death. He fully recognized the government. He said, you could have no power unless it was given to you from above. Jesus recognized Pilate had the power that he had. What revolutionary is going to stand before a governing authority and say, you have the power? Even if Jesus was saying, you got it from God, he is affirming that Pilate had power to execute. It was given by God, but he had power to execute. A revolutionary won't say that. A revolutionary will say, your power is illegitimate. You don't have any power over me because I'm king. Now, in later on in I guess it was earlier on in chapter 18, where he was standing before Pilate, and he tells about his kingdom not being part of this world. Pilate had never seen someone who claimed to be king, who not only didn't have an army, wasn't well-funded, but really didn't want to overthrow the governing authorities from Rome. Pilate had seen revolutionaries rise up among the Jews. Didn't act this way. Jesus was acting in a way that Pilate just could not fathom. And so Pilate understood there was nothing that he should have been able to hold him for. But Jesus stood silent there. He didn't complain to Pilate and say, you have the power to release me, therefore release me. He just told Pilate the facts. And so Pilate went on to declare that he had the power to crucify, and had he, or not, and had he used that power properly, justly, he would have released Jesus. But Pilate also knew if he released Jesus, he was going to have a problem. He was going to have a problem with the Jews, because all it took was someone for the Jews sending word to Tiberius Caesar that this man is supporting someone claiming to be a king. And Caesar or Pilate would have known his life would have been in danger. And so he didn't act. And so Jesus only spoke when he had to speak. But otherwise he was silent, because this was the will of God. Bill?
Just thought, we have everything laid out for us, how everyone reacted. Even in Matthew 26, when it said that the governor marveled that Jesus was saying nothing, but I was just thinking, Jesus being the master teacher, everything he did and said was for the benefit of those that would believe, and for those that would condemn him. It was, aimed at them too. Yeah. And it just seems that he never slipped, he thought of that all the time. What he said would be read and believed now, or what I mean? Yeah.
In fact, you'll take us to our point that Peter's going to make when it comes to our submission. What can we learn from what Jesus did here? Because the book of Acts will tell us that Philip preached Jesus from Isaiah 53. And the eunuch was convicted that Jesus was the Messiah from the entire chapter, including verse 7, that he opened not his mouth. But Peter brought this, what what Jesus did and taught Christians a lesson from it. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 2. I'd like us to read 18 to 25. We'll get Bill to read 18 and 19, Henry 20 and 21, 20, 21 and 22, and Tammy 23, 24, and 25. So, 1 Peter 2, you'll get 18, 19, and 20, I think. Or something like that.
Servants, be submissive to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the harsh. For this is commendable, if because of conscience towards God, one endures grief, suffering wrongfully.
Henry verses 20, 21, and 22.
For what a prayer is it, if when you are beaten for your faults, you take it patiently, but when you do good and suffer, if you take it patiently, this is commendable before God. For to raise you will come because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps. Who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth.
Who, when he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously, who himself bore our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, having died to sins, might live for righteousness, by whose stripes you were healed. For you were like sheep going astray, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls.
I think this is where you were going. This is the passage you probably were referring to when you were talking about Christ leaving us an example in which to follow. Peter is talking about servants be submissive to your masters. We often think, okay, well that's only slaves. Whoever is your master, you're to be submissive to. The government, unfortunately for the opinions of some, is our master. We are citizens. We are under their authority. We may not be slaves of the government in the sense of brutal slavery, but we are under their authority. Even when it comes to Christ, he is our master. We are to be submissive to our master. He said, it's not commendable for you, let's take that back. So you get no credit if you're going to be beaten for something you did wrong. Because that's what you deserved. You're going to have to take it, but there's no reason to take it patiently because you deserved it. You're not going to get any credit for taking it patiently. However, if you take being punished unjustly, and you do that patiently, that God approves of. And what better example do we have than Christ? Christ was the one who deserved none of it. And yet he received the punishment as if he was the worst of all sinners. He had sinned every sin that had ever been committed. That's how he was treated. And yet he opened not his mouth. He didn't revile those. In fact, on the cross, he forgave them. Imagine that. Imagine someone being treated poorly, being beaten and oppressed, thrown in jail, and being interviewed by the press. What do you have to say? I forgive everyone who did it. I didn't do anything wrong, but I forgive everyone who did it. And if I'm suffering here, I'll suffer until either I'm released or I die. You take it patiently. That's the example Christ left. And it's an example that it is very difficult to follow. It is so easy to revile. It is so easy to complain. It is so easy to speak ill of others who do us wrong. It is much harder to take it. Now that doesn't mean when we're among Christians that we shouldn't try to get people to change. But again, God is going to be the one who judges righteously. We can only do so much. If I can't get a brother to repent, then in the end, God's going to be the judge for that. I need to be the better person. I need to be the one who will accept it and forgive. But it's hard. But that's the example Christ gave. He was silent before his accusers. He needed to die for our sins, so he was going to do that. But he was providing us an example by which we can live. So that is the fulfillment of this prophecy. Isaiah 53 verse 7, in his last days of this earthly life, before being crucified, he had been prophesied he was going to be silent before his accusers. And that's exactly what Jesus was. He fulfilled those prophecies.
I'm not ashamed to